Hola, buenos días, gracias a todos. Ya les agradeció Guillermo. Bueno, me toca lo más fácil de hoy, que es presentar a dos amigos, a Yvon y a Sebastián. Nos conocemos hace mucho tiempo, lo mismo que con muchos que están ustedes acá. Y ellos van a venir acá a compartir con ustedes una charla. Lo único que me queda por decirles es que lo disfruten, porque va a ser una charla de amigos que se van a encontrar después de mucho tiempo y se van a contar cosas. Lo dejo con ustedes a Yvon Chouinard y Sebastián Letamendea.
Thank you, Yvon, being with us today. This is a crowd of young people, many of them aspiring entrepreneurs that want to do the right things. I have here some questions that I will use to guide our conversation. And the first question would be, I would ask you to dig in your memory and remember, when did that first company, Chouinard Equipment for Alpinists, how did it begin? How did the company evolve, and what did you feel about it?
Well, I was a climber, and I have an ability to look at almost anything and say, I can make this better. And so I looked at all the climbing equipment that was around, and I thought, it's very poor quality, and I think I have some ideas to make it better.
How did it evolve? What happened? How did the company grow?
Well, it grew organically, starting with one product. I taught myself to be a blacksmith, and I like working with my hands, and so I forged pitons out of steel instead of iron, and they were better quality. And I'm not an inventor, I'm an innovator. So it's very difficult to be an inventor because you have to start from zero. But to be an innovator, you start from one. And so life is pretty easy if you think of being an innovator rather than inventor.
And what made you become a businessman? Why not an independent climbing instructor, guide, a writer? You were writing a lot in the American Alpine Journal in those days. Or maybe an employee in someone else's startup.
Well, you know, when I was very young, I learned that I didn't like to play someone else's game. So, you know, in society, you're taught to compete with each other, and I want to compete with myself. That's what makes climbers and kayakers and people like that rather than football players. And if you invent your own games, you can always be a winner. And I learned that lesson a long time ago. And also, I don't like people telling me what to do. So that's why I became my own businessman. because then I don't have to answer to anyone else.
And tell us, how did Patagonia start?
Well, making equipment for mountain climbers was not a very profitable business. And so at the time, we all wore used clothing. We would buy used clothing to rock climb, and one day I was in winter climbing in Scotland, and I bought a rugby shirt. And at that time, there was no active sportswear in America. Everything was gray sweatshirts and sweatpants. And this rugby shirt had colorful stripes. I brought it back because I thought it would make a good shirt for climbing. And it did. And everybody said, wow, where did you get that? And so the entrepreneur in me said, oh, I should make these.
And this was 1968,
I think.
And when would you say that the company took off?
Well, the company took off probably in the 80s. Yeah, we grew very slowly and one product at a time. And in the 80s, it took off because we didn't invent, but we found this fleece. And we were the first one to bring fleece to the outdoor market. And that made us grow 50% a year. And
Patagonia has been here for a long time, but now you began something new, which is Patagonia Provisions, which is in the, let's say, food industry. And it would be nice if you could tell us how did Patagonia Provisions get in your brain, and what's happening with that?
Well, I always have ideas for new things in my brain, and I keep them there until it erupts. And then I've had an idea for food for a long time. And you know, the United Nations says that we will need 50% more food by 2050. That's not very long from now. And at the same time, we will have 30% less soil. So you can look at that as a doomsday scenario, or you can look at it as an opportunity. And so, you know, I tell my employees, what business do you think we're in? And they say, well, we're in the clothing business. I say, no. We're in the business of saving the planet, and we're making clothes to achieve that. And I see a crisis scenario with food, so I want to be part of the solution.
How is Patagonia Provisions doing now, business-wise? And more important, Yvon, does it matter?
Well, it's growing and doubling every year, and because we're doing everything organically, and we're trying to make products that are responsible. But we're revolutionizing the farming and food industry, because like right now we make all our cotton clothing is organically grown, but that's not going far enough. When you grow organically, you just merely prevent less damage. But I want to actually do good, which means growing cotton regeneratively. Regeneratively means that you grow crops in a way that builds topsoil You know, all life on Earth is dependent on this much topsoil. And it takes 1,000 years to grow this much topsoil naturally. But growing crops regeneratively, where you use cover crops, you use compost, and you do no tilling, no plowing, can build topsoil in a few years. And also captures carbon. And I think the only solution to global warming is through agriculture, the biggest solution. Because if we do agriculture working with nature, we can capture all the carbon we are producing and leave it in the soil. This is why I'm so interested in food and agriculture.
Patagonia is a certified B Corp and has a very high rating in the scale of B Corps. What does this mean to you?
Well, it means that, you know, in the States, the corporate laws, the capitalism laws, force you to become a public company at some point. If you die, you have to sell your company to pay the death taxes, and you to be responsible, whoever is still alive has to sell to the highest price. And the highest price, of course, is to become a public company, which I believe be the death of our company. And so, being a B Corp, we can establish what our values are, and we can establish that we don't have to sell to the highest price. And it'll continue to be a privately held company.
Yvon, there was an economist many years ago called Milton Friedman, who was a Nobel Prize winner, who said that the sole objective of companies is to make a profit for shareholders, and that it is up to shareholders to decide what to do with that money if they want to be socially responsible. That is not the case in Patagonia. So why not, and what is the role of companies in the public agenda?
Well, in this day and age, if you're not a responsible company, you're going to go out of business. I mean, I look around this room, I see all you young people, and you're making decisions in your buying as consumers every day, and it's a different world. It's I mean, my company is growing like crazy because we're taking business from other companies who are not being responsible. And I used to think that if we show that we can be a responsible company and be profitable, that other companies will follow. Well, as it turns out, it's only the small companies. The big corporations are not going to change. And like Friedman said, it's their sole responsibility, they feel, is to maximize profits by any way. And I don't believe that's the right thing to do. And I've proven to myself that it really works.
You may have considered at some stage, why don't I sell this company and donate the proceeds to NGOs, to foundations, set up a foundation, etc. However, your decision has been throughout to stay in business and keep the company. Why so?
Well, like I said, the purpose of my company is to save the planet. And I still feel I can do the best work by by not selling the company. And you know, the company is actually owned by a foundation. So it's a $1 billion company now, and people say, "Oh, you're a billionaire." No, I'm not a billionaire. I'm not the owner anymore. It's the ownership is owned by a foundation, and it will continue that way indefinitely.
In a book that you wrote, you describe yourself as a reluctant businessman. But the magnet for many of today's audience is the fact that you are a businessman and a successful businessman. So how can you reconcile those two concepts?
Well, I've never you know, I'm a product of the 60s, you know. And we always thought businessmen were evil. We called them grease balls. So I never wanted to be a businessman, but I just had ideas for new products all the time. And actually, I'm enjoying being a businessman because I like breaking the rules. I gave a speech at a university last year, and I told the students, look, life is a lot easier if you break the rules. If you try to conform yourself into a box and try to be like everyone else and be like what society wants you to be, it's very difficult. And you'll probably lose your soul. But if you break the rules, it's a lot of fun. And I really enjoy that part of it. And it's the creative part. You can be a creative businessman, and like, we won't hire MBAs at our company because they have a way of working that doesn't work at our company.
Patagonia mission, among other things, says that Patagonia does not want to cause unnecessary harm, use business to inspire, and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. How challenging is to live up to that mission?
Well, it is challenging, but if you want, it forces us to be more creative. Like, you know, we're trying to make our clothing last as long as possible, because that's the most responsible thing we can do, is make clothing that will last forever. And so to do that, we have to learn how to, different methods of construction. We have to use different fabrics. Like right now, we're making work clothing out of hemp, which is the strongest natural material. And you know, we've taken responsibility for our clothing forever. So if something needs repair, we built the largest repair facility in North America. So we take everything back and repair it. We have a repair truck that goes around to colleges and universities and teaches students how to repair their clothes, and we repair their clothes, no matter what they are, if it's a Patagonia product or not. We're just teaching students that you don't have to throw something away when it breaks down. You repair it. Just like your parents used to do, you know, sew a button back on. And if you no longer want your clothes, we will help you to find a new owner. And when the clothes is finally completely finished, we will recycle it into more clothing. So what that means, taking responsibility forever for the clothes, is I don't want to see the clothes come back. And so it forces us to make clothing that doesn't fall apart, doesn't wear out. And I've seen some baby clothes that have gone through 5 generations of babies, the same jacket.
I was listening in a conversation a short while ago that you were telling some people that Patagonia makes tutorials on how to sew buttons and how to fix sleeves, stuff like that.
Yeah, we're producing videos on how to repair your own. Yeah.
That's good. How would you define, what does the word success in business mean?
Well, I mean, I have a very simple life. The last thing I need is more money, and I'm a real dirtbag. You know, I own old cars, and so money is not a. For me, it's not a sign of success. For me, it's how much good we've produced at the end of the year. You know, I'm a very pessimistic person about the fate of the planet, and but I'm a happy person in that I feel like I'm part of the solution, so I can sleep at night. But you know, my parents taught me, you make a mess, you clean it up.
Do you find in the business world or in the world at large role models, mentors, companies you admire, people that are doing the right things?
No. Most efforts at being a responsible company is greenwashing. Almost all of it. It's only the very, very small little companies that are the little entrepreneurs that are trying to do things correctly. And certainly the part of capitalism that has to go away is the public corporations. And they're going to go away because what it does, capitalism produces very rich people and very poor people. We're losing the middle class, and it's going to go away because there will be no consumers. And, you know, capitalism depends on people buying the goods, and they won't be able to buy the goods. So it has to change into a socialist, capitalist system, a different system. You know, in this, when 1% of the people own 80% of the wealth of the world, this can't go on forever.
Do you think that Patagonia, the company, could have developed anywhere else but in California? Have you seen that culture in other parts?
No, it's a culture from the 60s. And California certainly was the center of the culture. And no, I don't think it could have come from anywhere else. So you think there's a regional ADN or a moment in time ADN? Yeah, it was a moment in time, and it was a region, and it was you know, young people breaking the rules, saying, you know, what works for my parents doesn't work for me, and you know, the government is evil, the business world is evil, and we want to do something different.
Yvon, before on this trip that you are with us now, began in Chile, where Tompkins Conservation was involved in the creation of a series of massive national parks, in fact, the size of Switzerland. What does this development mean to you?
Well, yeah, I was just in southern Chile and meeting with the president and establishing through Chris Tompkins, Doug Tompkins, my friends. Chris Tompkins was my CEO for 13 years. Doug Tompkins was a close friend for many, many years. And what they did is they established all these national parks in South America, both Argentina and Chile, and they got the government to put in some land, and now in Chile alone, there's 38% new national parks in Chile. And the lesson is, one person can achieve this. I mean, every great thing happens with just one or two people. And, you know, no other humans in history have created this much new natural parks and wilderness. So it's, you know, revolutions begin from the bottom. They don't begin from the top.
What made, so I understand what you say about one person. What made Doug such a force as to be the generator of this huge impact? He was an entrepreneur as well. He was in a business similar to yours.
Yeah, Doug Tompkins dropped out of high school at 15 years of age because he didn't like the teachers telling him what to do. So, and it's, you know, very similar to me. I didn't go to college, and so well, it was just his type of. He was a real force, and you know, when you know exactly what you want to do in life, then life is very easy. And of course, none of us knew what we wanted to do, but we knew we didn't want to do what everybody else wanted us to do. You know, his wife, Christine Tompkins, like I said, was our CEO. When she was a teenager, she would go to school. She was a surfer girl. So she would go to school with no shoes. And the teacher would say, "Go home, you have to wear shoes." The next day she would come with leather lace around her toes and around her feet and say, "These are sandals."
Yvon, and this would be our last question before opening QA to the audience. How has Patagonia, the region, now I'm talking about the region, how has Patagonia changed since you first visited many years ago? In December this year, it'll be 50 years since your ascent of Mount Fitzroy with Doug and a few other friends. So tell us, what have you seen in Patagonia over the past 50 years?
Well, I find myself going further and further south. Certainly, Bariloche has changed completely. It's now a big city. At Fitzroy, this horrible little town of Chalten, which I don't want to see. I want to remember that area when there were no people at all. One gaucho, and that was it. And so I prefer to stay away from there. But there are still great parts. I've just spent a month fishing in Chile and Argentina, and many, many places I saw no other people. So you have to keep looking further. But it influenced my life a lot, and also Doug Tompkins. Our first trip when we drove from California down to here was a big influence in our lives, because it took 6 months and 31 days sitting in an ice cave. Makes you think a lot. That's close to a month. So yeah, it was a big influence in our lives, and you know, that's why the logo is basically the the Patagonia Mountains, and I wanted to make clothing for those kind of conditions. And for Doug, he wanted to protect these places. And the work is continuing. His wife is now working on marine protected areas. and also some more national parks in Argentina.
Do you want to say a word on the marine protected areas and on the Rio Santa Cruz?
Well, the biggest problem with the planet is development. We're on a development model. Capitalism has to grow. I've had a talk with the president of Chile, Bachelet, and she says, well, we're few people in Chile. We need more people. We need more development. Blah blah blah. She needs to go to Iceland. 300,000 people. No one is living in the streets. It's all middle class. You can call the prime minister. His number's in the telephone book. The last election, when everybody is totaling up who won, one of the candidate who won went to a soccer game. There's not a bump on the roads. There's no peeling paint on the infrastructure, and all they have is hot and cold water and fish. They have no trees. They have no minerals, and they make it work because they have a very simple life. So the development model, whether it's religion, which the Pope is saying have more children, that's wrong. There's a limit to everything, and accepting the idea of limits changes your life. And there's a beginning and end to everything. I personally think the American empire is finished, especially with this president we have. He's the perfect president to take us down.
Okay, Yvon. Well, thank you very much for this initial conversation. And now,
seeing all these young people either makes me feel old or a rock star.
the latter, Yvon, the latter. So we will be opening the event to Q&A, questions from the audience. Prior to that, Yvon, I have this little thing here. If you want to have the questions in English. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just listen?
Yes, you'll be able to listen in English, questions that are open, posed in Spanish. So who wants to be the first?
Hi, Yvon. ¿Lo digo en castellano?
Como quieras.
Okay. I already told you I'm a very big fan. Myself, I had one of the first B Corps here in Argentina, and now I'm recertifying with a new model to be more scalable. But I wanted to ask you, because I know you're very against big corporations, but I think that companies are now the way to change the world. So I want to know, what is your vision for big companies that want to fight? Because I believe they can, but myself, I'm a small company, so I want to know, because you say that it's on us, but I think that they should also be doing their job.
Well, I found that, let me give you a story. 2 years ago, on Black Friday, Black Friday is the biggest shopping day of the year before Christmas. And I had an employee a few days before said, hey, why don't we give all our sales, all our revenue away to environmental causes on Black Friday. So the year before, we had done $2.5 million worth of business on Black Friday. So I expect to do something similar. They called me at 3 in the afternoon and said, oh, it's up to 6 million. By 6 o'clock in the evening, it was over 10 million. So $10 million that we had to give away, all of it, on top of the $10 million that we give through our 1% program. So that's $20 million we had to give away that year, and I'm going, ooh, it's getting to be real money. But you know what? And we expected our sales after Black Friday to go like this. They continued climbing like this through Christmas, after Christmas, and it's still climbing because 60% of the customers were new customers that we had never sold to before. You can't get advertising like that. It's everything that we do to be a more responsible company turns into better business. And that's the lesson that the big corporations need to see, but they have such little they have such little courage. These big corporations are afraid of everything. Like right now, we're attacking the president. We're attacking Trump. And no big corporations will do that for fear of losing some customers. And in fact, the Trump administration is attacking us, and they're saying, oh, Patagonia is making things in third world countries using slave labor, blah, blah, blah. And boycott them. Don't buy from them. When they came out with that announcement, our sales went up 600%. I love it. Bring it on. But because we're a private company, we can do anything. And these big corporations don't understand that things have changed. The consumer today is different than the consumer was in the 80s. But there's such large companies that they're just afraid to change. They're afraid to try new things.
Hi, Yvon. Thanks a lot for sharing the experience. I'm Julien from Comunidad Huerta. Basically, we dedicate ourselves to family farming and urban culture of food without using chemicals. You said something earlier that I do believe as well, that the future somehow is in the way we do agriculture. And basically, I think that's kind of the reason why I ended up giving up my job as vice president in a bank to come to Argentina and do that. How do you see, from your perspective, this future of agriculture? And how do you, if you have a point of view on that, you think it should be done to serve the goal that I think most of us hopefully share, to save our planet?
Well, I kind of explained some of that before, but agriculture, I just read a book published in Australia called Song of the Reed Warbler, and it's about regenerative agriculture in Australia. And in the book, they talked about that we went wrong when we became farmers. When we were hunter and gatherers, we were in a lot better shape than when we started agriculture. And he gives an example of a tribe in Africa still hunting and gathering. They do no agriculture. They have no cancer. No cancer at all. But, you know, when we sit down with a steak and a potato and a salad, we're not eating very varied food. Those people in that little African tribe eat between 80,000 and 100,000 different foods. They're getting nutrients that we don't get from our diet. And, you know, in one little teaspoon of topsoil, there are 5 billion microorganisms. Why? Nature doesn't make mistakes. There's a reason why there's 5 billion microorganisms. And when we do industrial agriculture, we kill all those organisms, which they have to be necessary for us. And if we can go back to working with nature rather than forcing nature to work with us, that's the solution for this planet.
Hello. Yvon, you mentioned before that you're a climber. My question is very simple. Which was the best business advice the mountain gave you?
Well, I think I've been a student of Zen philosophy all my life. Not as a religion, but as a philosophy. In that, you know, when you climb a mountain, it's more important how you climb a mountain than getting to the top. Because, you know, you can, if you're so focused on the end result, you will compromise. And I've used this in business. If you ask me how much money I made last year, I have no idea. I completely forgot. Or how much I will make this year. I'm more concerned about the process. And it's been a lesson in sports and in business to not focus on the end result, but focus on doing the process correctly. The day I've been a whitewater kayaker and made a lot of first descents in Argentina, Chile, New Guinea, all over. But the day I learned to kayak, I went down a difficult river with no paddle. I left the paddle at home because I had learned to do a hand roll with my hands to roll the kayak over. And so what that taught me is that the paddle is a very powerful tool. And you can, before you come to a rock, you can do a big sweep stroke and go around. But instead, I had to look very far ahead. I had to bank the boat to make a turn. I had to read the water like a fish. And I had a perfect run. And it taught me that the way to perfection is through simplification. And the way to have a good life, I think, is to make it as simple as possible. And that was the day I learned to kayak, really learned to kayak. And I do that with my fishing. Most of the time now I'm using a pole with no reel, a horsehair line on the end. And I'm catching more fish than I've ever caught.
Hola. Acá una pregunta profunda. Quería saber si en el logo de Patagonia lo estás mirando desde al Fitzroy, desde Argentina o desde Chile.
If the logo shows the view from Argentina or Chile.
The logo is from Argentina.
There's one cue to that. the logo has colors which are the sunset. So it can only be from Argentina, in addition to the silhouette of the mountains.
Yo quisiera saber qué tenés para decirnos a los emprendedores que hoy por hoy estamos haciendo una marca quizá de indumentaria sustentable y que vivimos con el temor de que de pronto venga una marca que ya está instituida y consolidada y que juega muy bien el negocio y de repente empiece a desarrollar materiales nobles y nos aplaste el negocio a estos pequeños emprendedores que estamos trabajando y disfrutando de este proceso mientras emprendemos.
Well, I don't think I can help you very much. It's you have to compete by being more creative, I think, because someone will always copy you. I was on a panel a few years ago of surf companies, and there was the CEOs of, you know, Quicksilver and Billabong, all these, Rip Curl, all these surf companies, and everyone talked about what they're doing in their company and stuff. And I talked about how much effort we put into our supply chain to make sure we cause no harm. And the president of one of the large surf companies, one of the largest, said, oh yeah, well, this was during the recession, you know, the world recession of a few years ago. He said, well, before the recession, we made a few t-shirts and hats out of organic cotton, but then the recession hit, so we had to stop. Like, he's proud of that because he saved the company some money. I said, well, how is your business doing? And he said, well, we're down 25%. And I said, we're up 30%. You know, here's a president of a large surf company, doesn't realize that the customer has changed. And now, you know, that company went through bankruptcy, and like the rest of the surf industry, which is making a bunch of, you know, crap clothes, they're all in terrible condition because they don't understand that the young surfers demanding better products and more responsible products. So that's the best way to compete, is to make your product, be creative and make it unique, and make it difficult for the large companies to compete with you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Julia. Thank you very much for your talk. I'm a journalist. I want to ask you about your fight against President Donald Trump, and because he's closing some national parks and Patagonia is going to sue the administration. Can you talk about that? How this affect your company, and what are you planning to do against this action? Thank you.
Well, this administration is it's all very conservative, and they believe in privatizing everything. They want to privatize our national parks. They're going to charge $70 a day to visit a national park. If you're not rich, you can't visit your own national park. These parks belong to every single one of us, and you know, I've called the president evil, because here's why. If you're denying that climate change is happening, you're either very, very stupid, or you know it's happening, but you prefer to ignore it to make more money, or to stay in power, or whatever. And that's evil. I mean, everyone knows that this climate change is happening. So, and these people, you know, they know it, but they prefer to avoid doing anything about it. And that's evilness. That's a definition of evil, I think. And so, yeah, we're suing the government now. Patagonia itself is going to spend a lot of money in suing the government for what they did in taking back public lands. Their goal is to give away all public lands to the states, and then the states can sell them off for development. These places in Utah that they stole, they want to build uranium mines. Like, that's the last thing the world needs, is more uranium. So anyway, I mean, I don't want to be in politics, but I have to be, because we have to do something about this. It's the biggest thing happening, and it's going to happen. The next midterm elections, you watch. There'll be a turnover of Congress, and then Trump will not be able to do as much as he can now.
Hola, over here. My name is Lucia. I am an entrepreneur. We're making Dandy Buenos Aires. This is a men care brand. We are doing cosmetics, sustainable cosmetics in Argentina. That's pretty tough. And my question is, how, as you've been in the earth for a lot of years, I'm worried or thinking about how you lived the fact that during the 90s we were worried about AIDS or about poverty, and now we're worried about who made my clothes, or Me Too, or the sexual abuse of children in Vietnam. But I still feel that because of what we were saying about development, and that there are a lot of people that cannot think about just getting the food for their family, there's a lot of people that cannot even think about changing things. And then how do you get your energy to keep on, to face Trump or whoever is doing things even worse? And how you think we can do that from a small country, doing a little change?
Well, we make over 1,000 styles twice a year. That's a lot of product, a lot of different styles. But now we're up to over 50% that we do fair trade. So we work with fair trade factories. We started with, just a few percent. Now we're over 50%, and within 5 years we hope to be 100%. And so being fair trade means the workers get a lot more money. And I've seen the result of this in Bangladesh, or the latest was Colombia, a factory that we use in a very poor part of Colombia. The women working in the factory can't afford to send their kids to school because they have to buy a uniform, and they can't afford a uniform. With the bonus they get by making Patagonia products, they can buy a uniform, they can put their kids in school. I mean, that makes me feel pretty good. And so right now we're working with a new standard in agriculture, going beyond organic. The problem with organic agriculture is that they're plowing, tilling the soil after every crop. It has nothing to do with fair trade labor. And so my company itself is working on a new definition of regenerative/organic. And so that is also going to include working conditions. So hopefully you'll be able to buy some vegetables that are regenerative organic, that are growing topsoil and capturing carbon and going way beyond organic. Organic is, if you buy hydroponic vegetables grown in chemicals and liquid, you can call that organic, and that's wrong. Without the soil, it should not be organic.
Hi. Before ask you if you admire any other company that, was trying to change the world, you said no. And I would like to know your opinion on Elon Musk and his company, SpaceX, Solar City, and Tesla.
Solar City? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I don't hang around with them. And in fact, I don't hang around with any businessman. So it's hard for me to say, you know, what he's doing, but he believes that we should be going to Mars and populating Mars, that give up on this planet, let's go and immigrate to Mars. And that's bullshit. We have to save this planet. And technology is part of it, but a small part of it, I think. I think more important is that we should work with nature. And certainly he's not doing that.
Hello, my name is Verena. I'm from Manos Verdes Foundation. We work with kids and do environmental education. So one of our tasks is to develop new generations with a positive inspiration for the future. And my question is, what is your personal vision for the future of this planet, and maybe until 2050, 2100? What do you think will this planet be?
Well, what will this planet be in 2050 or 2100? The statistics are very grim. You know, 20 years ago in California, the scientists had 3 scenarios for sea level rise. One scenario, which was the best one, was it was going to rise 3 meters by 2100. No, 1 meter. 1 meter by 2100. Another scenario was 2 meters by 2100. The third scenario, and the least likely to happen, was 3 meters. And now they're saying this year, the most likely to happen is 3 meters. So, whatever you do in your future life, the most important thing to do is to try to save this planet. Like David Brower said, there's no business to be done on a dead planet. There's nothing to be done on a dead planet. And we're facing, I can't say how important it is and how dire it is. And this is not going to happen at 2100. It's going to happen, it's happening today, every day. It's a very serious situation, and that's why I stay in business. And you know, my generation is doing nothing about it. Nothing. It's only you people, the young people. I mean, every young person I talk to these days, going to college or university, is studying environmental studies. Every single one. I can't believe it. Because you know what's happening and you want to do something about it. And so, you know, working with children about this, there's a little school. I was just in La Pampa, down south of Esquel, little tiny village. The school there has gotten so many awards for being the best rural school in Argentina. All the children grow a garden. They have a huge garden, and they sell the produce from that garden. They have ducks, they have chickens, they have sheep, and they grow all the vegetables and they sell them. And it helps the school, but it teaches the children to be self-sufficient and to know where food comes from. That's the biggest lesson I think you can give children, to know where the food comes from. Anyway.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Yvon, Sebastián. Muchas gracias a todos por la participación en este espacio.